Hello and welcome, I'm Ellie Richardson and you are watching The World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top headlines of this hour. The United States and Iran have concluded 2 days of indirect talks in Doha focused on the Strait of Hormuz and the release of frozen Iranian funds. While both sides discussed key issues under their interim agreement, no major progress was made towards a broader peace deal. Iran has warned the United States and Israel against any military action as the country prepares for the state funeral of the supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Military officials said any new attack would be met with a severe response from Iran's armed forces. Syria's foreign ministry says Damascus is open to meeting Hezbollah if it serves national interest. The remarks came during a visit to Beirut amid renewed regional tensions and speculation over Syria's future role in Lebanon. Russia launched a major drone and missile attack on Kyiv, killing at least 17 people and injuring 56 others, including 2 children. Ukrainian officials said dozens of sites were damaged, with a residential apartment building partially collapsing after a direct strike. Venezuela's earthquake death toll has risen to 2,295, with more than 11,000 people injured following the twin quakes. Authorities say over 6,400 survivors have been rescued as nationwide relief efforts continue during 7 days of national mourning. Firefighters are battling multiple wildfires across southern France after a record European heatwave left vegetation tinder dry. Strong winds have fueled the blazes, which have already burned more than 1,200 hectares near Martial. Polish authorities have detained a Belarusian and a Polish citizen on suspicion of spying for Belarusian intelligence. Officials allege that the pair monitored and photographed members of the Belarusian exile community during events in Warsaw. And Lithuania's political parties have agreed to remove a constitutional ban on nuclear weapons, citing a deteriorating security environment. President Gitana Nausėda said that the change would provide greater flexibility if future defence needs require it. And for your top stories of this hour, Kyiv has suffered what officials are describing as the most massive attack of the war, as a wave of Russian missiles and drones pummeled the Ukrainian capital overnight. The barrage has left at least 17 people dead and scores more injured, with emergency crews continuing to search for survivors trapped beneath the rubble of destroyed apartment buildings. According to Ukrainian military officials, Russia has launched a coordinated assault involving dozens of ballistic missiles and hundreds of long-range drones. The impact was felt across the entire city, with damage recorded at more than 30 locations, including residential blocks, an ambulance station and a civilian infrastructure. Kyiv Mayor Vitaly Klitschko has declared a day of mourning for Friday, calling the assault a night of horror for the city's 3 million residents. Moscow has claimed that the strikes were direct retaliation for recent Ukrainian long-range drone attacks against Russian oil refineries and fuel infrastructure. However, Ukrainian foreign minister has rejected these justifications, condemning the targeting of civilians and urgently calling upon international allies to expedite the delivery of more advanced air defense systems. Let's listen in to what the Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov had to say.
Сегодня во время ежедневного доклада Верховному главнокомандующему начальник Генштаба Герасимов также доложил о результатах массированного ответного удара вооруженных сил Российской Федерации по Киеву, другим населенным пунктам в контексте ударов, конечно же, исключительно по военным или околовоенным объектам. То, что эскалация со стороны Европы происходит, это однозначно. То, что по мере становления своей оборонной идентичности Евросоюз занялся и вступил на путь милитаризации и, собственно, посвящает себя теме конфронтации с Российской Федерацией, это тоже однозначно.
We are now being joined by Nikola Mikovic, who's a journalist and political analyst, joining us live from Serbia, and also Mitali Nikor, economist from New Delhi. Thank you for joining us back here. Now, Nikola, Russia says the massive strikes on Kyiv were a retaliation for Ukraine's long-range drone attacks on Russian energy infrastructure. Does this signal a dangerous shift towards a cycle of strategic retaliation where each side is increasingly targeting the other's critical infrastructure?
I think it doesn't make much sense to talk about Russia's so-called retaliation, because this is how this war started. Russia launched the invasion of Ukraine. So everything that Ukraine is doing is a form of retaliation. So Ukraine is responding to Russian initial invasion. So what Russia is doing is it's trying to achieve its military and political goals in Ukraine by launching those missile and drone strikes, while it's Ukraine that's retaliating and trying to protect itself. We can debate whether those Russian attacks were efficient or not. I think they were not. I think Russia did not hit any important facilities in Kyiv, as it did not in the past, because as we know, not a single bridge over the Dnieper River has been destroyed over the past almost 5 years. Key oil depots remain intact, and the tunnels in Western Ukraine and so on. So Russia is focused on striking insignificant sites in Ukraine. It's striking gas stations in eastern Ukraine. In Kiev, according to reports, it hit some firms producing military equipment, although it cannot be independently verified, because Ukraine, unlike Russia, is fighting a war, and there is a strong military censorship in Ukraine. So people are not allowed to freely film the impact of drone and missile strikes, which is why we cannot say for sure what exactly Russia hit. Russia, on the other hand, is not fighting the war. It is conducting the so-called special military operation, which allows people to freely film the impact of Ukrainian drone and missile strike. So whenever Ukraine hits a facility in Russia, we know exactly what was destroyed, and we know how serious the damage was. That's not the case when it comes to Ukraine, so we cannot say what exactly Russia destroyed, except those civilian buildings that the Ukrainian officials presented to the international media.
Of course, and also the scale of this attack has once again exposed the vulnerability of Ukraine's air defence network. Are Kyiv's Western partners moving quickly enough to replenish air defence systems and interceptors, or is Ukraine entering a period of growing strategic disadvantage?
No, I don't think so. I think it is Ukraine that now has the initiative, and it is Ukraine that's successfully destroying Russian military and civilian infrastructure all over the country, including oil refineries. Of course, Zelensky and other Ukrainian leaders will constantly complain how Ukraine lacks air defense systems, which is true. But on the other hand, even if it had more Patriot missiles and other air defense systems, there's no guarantee that it would be able to shoot down all Russian Geran or Shahid drones and other missiles. It could protect the country to a certain extent, but not 100%, that's for sure. That's what the US-Iran war has clearly demonstrated. Now, when it comes to the second part of your question, I don't think Ukraine is in a particularly bad position at this point. I think it's Russia that's suffering a defeat, not on the battlefield, but when it comes to logistics. So it's Russia that's suffering huge damage as a result of Ukrainian strikes on its energy infrastructure. Now the country is forced to import oil, and we can see reports of Russian refineries burning on a daily basis, while many Ukrainian oil depots in Odessa and Dnipropetrovsk regions, according to Russian reports, remain intact, which is quite interesting. Why Russia, almost 5 years after it launched the invasion of Ukraine, did not strike those oil depots. So there's a lot of mysteries when it comes to this war.
Of course. Nikola, please stay with us, as I'll be joining back with you very shortly. Now, Russia has officially commenced seaborne gasoline imports from India to counter critical fuel shortages. This move follows months of intensified Ukrainian drone strikes targeting Russia's core energy infrastructure, which have disrupted refining capacity and led to a nationwide fuel rationing. The campaign systematically hit vital refineries across the country. Major sites struck in recent weeks and months include the Kapitonyov refinery, which has been serving the Moscow region as it has suffered multiple drone strikes since early June. Taniko refinery, which is operated by Tanneft, it was hit in mid-June, significantly impacting production capacity, and the Slavansk na Kuberna, which is a key refinery in the Krasnodar region, vital for the Black Sea exports. Yaroslavl refinery, which is located 700 kilometers from the border. It was reportedly targeted in late June. And the UFA refinery, one of the nation's largest lubricant producers, struck twice within the past week alone. Additionally, pipeline hubs and export terminals, including those at US Sluga, Primorsk and Novorossiysk, have faced repeated targets throughout the spring, reducing Moscow's overall refining output by an estimated 20%, with daily summer consumption exceeding 110,000 tons. The Kremlin is now subsidizing imports pegged to Indian market prices to bridge the supply gap as both nations navigate this dynamic. The impact on global energy markets remains significant. We are now being joined once again by Nicola. Thank you for joining us back here. Also joining us here is Mitali Nakor, who's an economist joining us from New Delhi. To the both of you, thank you for joining us here and being with us for this story. Now, Mitali, if I could please come to you first. Russia has begun importing gasoline from India after sustained Ukrainian drone attacks, which has disrupted its refining capacity. Does this mark the first clear indication that Ukraine's strategy of targeting Russia's energy infrastructure is imposing significant logistical and economic costs on Moscow's war effort?
So I think it's quite interesting. This is almost like a reversal of sorts, because India has always been the real importer from Russia when it comes to crude oil and petroleum products, and also natural gas. But obviously in this situation, the roles are reversed, and we're starting to see Russia, import more of the refined gas from India. It's not that, obviously it's not crude to that extent, but a refined product that India can process and send back. However, I do think that, to be a long-term phenomenon. I think this is more of a bridge, situation until the situation in Russia normalizes. But of course, in a time of need, it also reflects the Indian-Russian relationship in that sense that, in the time of need, India has always come to Russia's aid and vice versa. And it kind of reflects at a global stage as well, where the geopolitical loyalties lie, because India has always made it very clear that it does not support any over effort, and it always stands for peace. But it also has made clear that it is Russia's all-weather friend and ally.
Of course. And Nicola, over to you now, please. Ukraine's drone campaign has increasingly shifted from symbolic strikes to targeting Russia's refining, storage and export infrastructure. Could attacks on energy assets become the defining front of the war, with greater strategic impact than territorial gain on the battlefield?
Ukrainian strikes were never symbolic. Russian strikes were symbolic and still are, many of them. It's very interesting what Russia is doing now. So it's forced to import fuel from India, while in the past it was, and it's still actually doing, it's still exporting crude oil to India and to other countries. But now, as a result of Ukrainian strikes, many Russian oil refineries have been either destroyed or significantly damaged. So as a result, Russia is forced to import petroleum products. Now, what Vladimir Putin managed to achieve is to turn Russia into one of those poor African countries that do have natural resources but are forced to import fuel because they do not have their own refineries. Russia is now in a similar situation. It does not have any refineries that can work properly, which is a result of Ukrainian actions. And I don't think the situation in Russia will normalize anytime soon, because Ukraine is systematically destroying Russian energy infrastructure and will almost certainly continue doing that as long as the war goes on. So Russia's position is extremely difficult. And frankly, as long as Putin and Gerasimov and other members of the Russian elite are in charge, I don't see how the situation can change in Russia's favor.
Vitaly, back to you, please. Despite the unprecedented Western sanctions, Russia continues to find alternative suppliers and trading partners. Does Russia's ability to source gasoline from India highlight the limits of sanctions in isolating major economies during prolonged conflicts?
At this point in time, when we think about it, whether it's Russia or any other side, even the Ukrainian side, everybody has their allies, everybody has their geopolitical partnerships in place. Russia will have certain allies, so will Ukraine. I mean, despite the kind of noises that Donald Trump has been making, it's not as though he has actually withdrawn from the Ukrainian war. So, very honestly, I don't think that in any prolonged geopolitical context, a lot of countries will have their interests, right? I mean, some countries will have their interest that once this particular side is victorious, maybe I will get something out of it. And that's what America is also doing. America is investing in this war effort fronted by Ukraine so that they can keep on charging Ukraine higher and higher interests for war financing, as well as seek more and more control of their assets and of their mineral wealth. So at the end of the day, a lot of countries will have their proxies going on in these situations. I personally feel that in this situation, the one entity which has come out to be the weakest is actually the United Nations, because they haven't been able to influence countries at all in terms of trying to move towards peace and towards a cessation of the conflict. And we're continuing to see this entire, geopolitical nonsense on display. But how does it impact real people, real lives, real businesses, small and medium enterprises, women and children? I don't think that the narrative has focused on that at all in the last 3 years, and that's mainly because of a failure of the UN system to control the narrative and to create more conditions for the end of the war.
And Nicola, to you, please. As energy security becomes an increasingly important dimension of modern warfare, are we witnessing the emergence of a new doctrine where refineries, pipelines, fuel logistics are as strategically significant as military bases and conventional battlefields?
Yes, we are, and we had the opportunity to witness that during the US-Iran war, when Iran started firing drone and missiles on neighboring Gulf states, also seeking to destroy their energy infrastructure and their oil depots. But unlike Russia, they took necessary steps to protect their energy facilities. They started building those concrete protection walls around oil depots. Russia did not do that, even though it had 5 years to prepare for this. But as we can see, it's not ready yet. Even it didn't even protect its aircraft, military airfields. It didn't even build those concrete hangars, let alone protecting its own energy infrastructure. As a result, it's suffering huge damage. And yes, in the future, in this war and in any other wars, energy will play a huge, extremely important role. And we see that those FPV drones and other drones are very dangerous because they can easily destroy oil refineries and oil depots. So I think not only in Russia and Ukraine, but in any other countries, the authorities will have to find ways to protect those facilities from potential drone strikes. So the future warfare is drone warfare, I'm afraid.
And Mitali, if Russia's refining disruptions persist, what could be the broader consequences for global energy markets, fuel prices and supply chains, particularly for emerging economies that remain heavily dependent on stable energy imports?
No, I think, what we're going to start to see is exactly as Nicola very rightly pointed out, that certain countries which, remain insulated from the global, crisis in that sense of it spreading from country to country, who retain the refining capacity, they will be the ones, where a lot of the refinery raw materials, whether it's crude oil, whether it's natural gas, that will flow. And then they would actually be refining and sending it back to those countries, regardless of whether, those countries actually have the refining capacity or not, because refining capacity then becomes, the real war weapon. But I also feel that countries like India need to be far more neutral, because as we move forward, that puts our refining capacity, that puts our refineries in the spotlight, and also makes them targets for, if the conflict spreads. And in that situation, we need to be neutral and service multiple sides in a war, not only one side, and sort of have that neutrality very clearly spelled out.
Thank you, Mitali and Nicola, for joining us here today on NewsX. Well, it's a pleasure, as always, to be able to have you both on. We now move on as Syrian Foreign Minister Asaad Al-Shaibani has met Lebanese Parliament Speaker, a key Hezbollah ally, during his visit to Beirut. This marks Shaibani's first meeting with Berri and comes at a time of heightened regional tensions. Shaibani was received by Lebanese President Joseph Aoun before holding talks with Berri. The visit is significant as Damascus has made it clear it does not want military involvement in Lebanon, despite repeated pressure from US President Donald Trump, who has suggested Syria could deal with Hezbollah. Syrian President Al-Sharaa has ruled out intervention, saying his government has no intention of reopening old wounds. Relations remain strained, with Syria's new leadership openly hostile towards Hezbollah due to its past support for former President Bashar al-Assad. Meanwhile, Hezbollah continues to deny any presence inside Syria. We are now being joined by Ali Mohammed Abashbak, who's an independent West Asia researcher, and joining us from Cairo. Ali, always an absolute pleasure to be able to have you on. Thank you for joining us here today on NewsX World. Now, Syrian Foreign Minister is meeting with Lebanese Parliament Speaker comes despite the new Syrian's leadership openly strained relationship with Hezbollah. Does this reflect pragmatic diplomacy with the Lebanese state, or does it signal a cautious attempt to redefine Syria's regional role, do you think? Ali?
Thank you, Lee, for having me. I guess this I guess this is not a crucial meet, especially the Parliament Speaker Nabih Berri. He's one of the head of the parliament in Lebanon, and his meeting, it's considered one of the diplomatic meet between both of them. I guess they will not discuss about the disarming Hezbollah, since also Shaibani, that the foreign minister, he met the prime minister and also the president Michel Aoun and the prime minister. So I guess this kind of meet, it's a normal to empathize that Syria will not be a part and it will not interfere in the Lebanese issue and internal cases like what we have seen previous in in 1967 when that when Syrian army interfere in Lebanon's civil war, like what we have seen at that time. So I guess this kind of meeting, it's not a crucial, it's just only to empathize. They will not take a favor with anyone in case that the government was intent to disarming Hezbollah since that Benjamin Netanyahu he held that withdrawing from the point from the pilot war point for that occupied in South Lebanon. Also. Back to 1967, when the Syrian army interfered in civil war in Hezbollah, civil war in Lebanon at that time in 1967, it was just only because of the demand from Arab Sea, and also because of this was from multi-Arab nation to let the Syrian army to interfere and to also mediate between the actor in the conflict. I guess also Shaibani, he confirmed for all the actor in Iraq in Lebanon like Aoun, Nabih Berri, and also Nawaf Salami. He confirmed that Syria will not be a party and it will not be a play in this conflict. Also, they will secure the border with the Lebanon. That's mean the supplies, the military supplies and logistic supplies for Hezbollah. It will be a very tough and very difficult. This means, I guess, it's to discuss about the detented in between both of them. There is some detented in Lebanon that belongs to Bashar al-Assad's regime, and also some other in Syria that belongs that they have been detained in during the Bashar al-Assad's regime. Also, they want to know about their fate. So I guess this kind of meeting is just only for cooperating and about the security. Also, the situation in Syria itself is not stable since they are suffering from the minority Kurd and also Druze. So all of these cases in Syria up to now, the security situation is not stable. So how they could interfere in such kind of duty to disarming Hezbollah, since their cases they couldn't solve it and they couldn't figure out it up to now. This kind of meet, I guess, it's just only for posting the coordination between both of them, between Syria and Lebanon, and about Hezbollah allies. I guess Nabih Berri, he's the parliament, the head of the parliament, and he's also the parliament speaker. So I guess it's a kind of diplomatic meet and the visit for Beirut. It's not discussing about disarming Hezbollah as much as they are just only want to make headlines about their about the diplomatic meet, about diplomatic case.
Ali, thank you so much for joining us and giving us those insights here on NewsX. Well, pleasure as always to have you on. And that is all we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX for more news updates from around the world.